The dog visits his dying owner. What happens next will leave you speechless. The hospital room was wrapped in a heavy, almost sacred silence. The only sound came from the slow, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the soft hum of machines that surrounded the bed. Pale morning light filtered through the half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the white sheets. Nurses moved quietly in the hallway, their voices hushed, as if the very air carried the weight of sorrow. On the bed lay Thomas, frail and motionless, his chest rising and falling with effort. His face told a story of battles fought and a life lived fully, but now he seemed only to wait. Every day for the last week, Thomas had whispered the same request to the nurses. "I want to see Buddy. Please, bring me my dog." His voice was weak, trembling like a leaf in the wind, but filled with hope. The nurses exchanged sympathetic looks, unsure if the hospital would allow such a thing. After all, a large German shepherd inside a sterile ward was unusual, yet the longing in his eyes spoke louder than any policy. Finally, the head nurse sighed, knowing time was running out. That night, she made the call that would change everything. The next morning, the automatic doors of the hospital slid open, and in trotted Buddy, the German shepherd who had been Thomas's shadow for over a decade. His thick black and tan coat shimmered under the fluorescent lights, and his intelligent eyes scanned the unfamiliar corridors. Every person who saw him seemed to pause, some in awe, others in surprise. A nurse led him down the hall, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors, as if the building itself held its breath for this reunion. As Buddy approached Thomas's room, the dog slowed, his ears pricking forward. He could smell the faint traces of antiseptic and medication, but beneath it, he sensed something far more important, his human. Pushing the door open with his nose, Buddy stepped inside, and the sight before him made his heart race. Thomas, pale and weak, lifted his head ever so slightly, and a faint smile touched his lips. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "Buddy, you came." Without hesitation, Buddy leapt gently onto the bed, curling against his owner's side. Thomas's frail hand reached out and rested on the dog's fur, and for the first time in weeks, a flicker of life and warmth filled the room. Buddy pressed his head gently against Thomas's chest, his deep brown eyes shimmering with recognition. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed to slow as the man's trembling hands buried themselves in the dog's thick fur. For a moment, the sterile hospital room transformed into a sanctuary of love and memories. Nurses who peeked and found themselves holding back tears, watching the unspoken bond between man and dog speak louder than any words ever could. Thomas closed his eyes, flashes of the past filling his mind, long walks through the park, rainy nights by the fireplace, and the day Buddy had saved him from a home intruder. Each memory felt like a lifeline pulling him back from the edge. His voice, weak but steady, broke the silence. "I didn't think I'd see you again, boy." Buddy responded with a low whine, his tail thumping softly against the hospital sheets, as if reassuring his owner that he was there to stay. The staff watched in awe as Thomas's monitors showed slight improvement, a faint yet undeniable spark of life returning. Buddy seemed to sense it too, curling closer, his breathing syncing with the man he loved more than anyone else in the world. The doctors stood just outside the glass window, whispering in disbelief. Thomas's vitals, which had been alarmingly low all morning, were now stabilizing. His breathing grew steadier, and a faint color returned to his cheeks. It was as if Buddy's presence had breathed life into him, igniting a spark that medicine alone couldn't provide. Inside the room, the bond between man and dog deepened with every passing moment. Buddy rested his paw on Thomas's arm, refusing to move even when a nurse tried to gently guide him aside. The German shepherd's gaze never wavered, locked on his owner's face with fierce devotion. Visitors and staff alike paused in the hallway, witnessing a love so raw and unbreakable that it seemed to silence the entire ward. Thomas slowly opened his eyes again and whispered, "You're my miracle, Buddy." His voice cracked, but a hint of a smile tugged at his lips. The nurse who had been monitoring him wiped away a tear, unable to ignore the emotional transformation before her. In that moment, hope filled the room, a hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't goodbye after all. As Buddy lay beside Thomas, something extraordinary happened. The heart monitor, which had been unpredictable for days, now showed a steadier rhythm. Nurses exchanged surprised glances, whispering that they had never seen such a sudden improvement. Without medical intervention, it was as if the dog's presence was reviving his spirit, pulling him back from the brink of death. Moments later, Thomas shifted slightly and gasped, clutching Buddy's fur with weak hands. I can feel again," he whispered, his eyes glistening. A nurse hurried to check his vitals and froze. "Doctor, you need to see this," she called, her voice tinged with disbelief. The medical team rushed in, examining the monitors. And Thomas's response. The attending physician shook his head in wonder. "It's like he's fighting to live, for his dog," he murmured, unable to hide his astonishment. The room became a mixture of awe and silence as Thomas's hand moved to gently cup Buddy's face. "You're saving me, aren't you?" he said softly. Buddy responded with a tender lick to his owner's hand, his eyes full of unwavering love. For the staff, this was no longer just a medical case. It was a living testament to the unexplainable power of love and loyalty. The doctor's voice broke the stunned silence. "We need to move him to the surgical suite immediately. He has a chance now." Nurses sprang into action, carefully preparing Thomas for transport. Buddy hesitated as the hospital bed began to roll, his claws clicking against the tile as he followed. Every few seconds, he glanced up at Thomas, unwilling to let him out of his sight. The hallway felt endless, filled with the echo of hurried footsteps and the soft hum of machines being wheeled alongside. Orderlies and doctors moved with precision, their expressions tense but hopeful. Buddy trotted just behind the stretcher, his tail low but his posture protective, like a silent guardian escorting his best friend toward salvation. In the waiting area, other patients and visitors stopped and stared, their whispers following the procession. Finally, they reached the double doors of the operating room. A nurse knelt to gently hold Buddy back. "He has to go in alone now," she said softly. Buddy let out a low, anxious whine, his eyes glued to Thomas. As the doors swung shut, Thomas lifted a trembling hand in a faint wave. It was a silent promise. "Hold on, Buddy. I'm not done fighting yet." Hours felt like days in the silent waiting room. Buddy sat patiently on the cold tile floor, his ears flicking at every sound, eyes locked on the operating room doors. Mark, Thomas's son, paced back and forth, glancing at the loyal dog. "He hasn't moved an inch," he whispered to a nurse, who nodded, tears in her eyes. Finally, the door swung open. The surgeon approached, his face unreadable for a moment that felt like forever. Then, a smile broke through. "He's stable." "The surgery was a success," he announced. Mark exhaled in relief, and Buddy let out a soft bark, tail thumping the floor. It was as if he understood the life-changing news. Later, when Thomas was wheeled back into his room, Buddy was allowed in. The German shepherd leapt gently onto the bed, pressing his head against Thomas's chest. Weak but smiling, Thomas whispered, "You saved me, Buddy. You really are my guardian angel." The room fell silent, every heart moved by the raw love before them. As the sun set outside the hospital window, Buddy finally curled up at Thomas's side, content and proud. Against all odds, the bond between a dying man and his dog had defied fate and brought a miracle to life.